Hey, Becky.
Hey, Anand, how's it going?
Good.
All right. Um,
You want to share the screen or there's something?
let's just make sure that this
Becky, I'll make you the host.
Sure.
Cool. So I'm just actually the host, so you can change anything.
All right. Are you able to see my screen in this
Yep.
case?
Yep.
It's always fun trying to hit the zoom settings. Uh,
Yep.
do you see the Jupyter page now?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So, okay. Lovely. So, do you usually wait for a couple minutes before you get started?
We'll wait for a couple minutes.
Excellent.
Maybe we'll give 1 more minute.
Sounds good. I know this is the definitely last. I think it's reading day at Illinois, so
Y-
I think end of the semester generally.
Yeah, we have like 35 people or 36 people registered, so hopefully we'll get more.
If not, that's fine too. So
Yeah, that's fine too. Yeah.
I will say the fewer people we get, the more likely I'm like to start calling on folks.
Okay, we are getting a few more people. Okay, I guess we'll get started and we'll have people join in. Um, Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to people on the East Coast. Um, yeah, so my name is Anand Padmanabhan. I'm a research associate professor in the Department of Geography and GI Science at the University of Illinois. And for iGuide, I serve the role as a managing director. iGuide is the Institute for Geospatial Understanding through an Integrative Discovery Environment. And we are doing this kind of what we call virtual consulting office almost on a regular basis, on a weekly basis. Um, so the virtual consulting office is kind of a mechanism to share what we are doing in iGuide and the related community to the broad, I guess, geospatial and iGuide communities. Um, the focus is not on like getting like all the cutting edge research things, but like on things that you might find useful and uh, you can maybe use it in your day-to-day work. So in that kind of a series, we have one today, led by Becky or Rebecca Vandewalle. Becky has been a student in CyberGIS Center for the past few years, and um, she just graduated with her PhD. So now she's Dr. Vandewalle, and she'll be starting assistant professor position at University of South Florida. So yeah, so today Becky is going to be sharing with us how to create Jupyter Notebooks on the iGuide platform, and how to share these, and how to make this, like how to run these notebooks, and what are the things you could do. She has used the platform for a while, and she is um, well versed with Jupyter, and she has done a lot of these kinds of tutorial and development work. So she's one of the best people you can have for doing these kinds of things. So please welcome Becky, and feel free to interrupt, ask questions, and make sure that you understand what you can do with the platform, and we go from there. Thank you, Becky. On to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anand. So yeah, I wanted to start off and just say that this is something that I've always been interested in. The topic today will specifically be on how to create interactive widgets in Jupyter Notebooks. So basically, this is a tool that can be used for some really interesting subcomponents that you can embed in a notebook to help have interactivity with your code. Um, I'm gonna have sort of two sections. So in the first one, just show what widgets are available, the base set of widgets, and these are ones where you don't have to do very much. They're kind of embedded already. And then the second half, I'll show you how to use widgets and a package called Bokeh to put some really neat interactive maps without having to do a whole lot of coding, but basically just a taste of how you can make some um, more advanced interactivity that's specifically map related within one of these notebooks. So one thing, this doesn't really require too much of a background in coding. So if you are new-ish to Python or JavaScript, please feel free to stop me at any time with questions like Anand said. Either you can say something or feel free to type some questions in the chat, and I'll try and look at that as I get there. So let's start by sharing the screen again. All right. Yes. Okay. So the first window you should see is the iGuide platform window. Anand, can you see this window?
Yeah, I can.
Excellent. Okay. So if this is one of your first times in these sessions, well, I'm going to be using the iGuide platform today to show you how this works. I just put it again in the chat. So you can access the platform by going to platform.i-guide.io. And if you haven't already, there will be a section over here where you can click login. And if you have created an account, you should be able to log in. If you haven't, as long as you have an institutional email address, it's very quick. And the cool thing about this iGuide platform is it shows geospatial and data science elements like maps or data sets, very much useful information, but also you can get into the Jupyter backend, which is what I'll be using today. So I have already logged in. If you want to follow along, you can go to platform.i-guide.io, hit the login button here, either create an account or log in. And if you need some help doing that, okay, thank you, Anand. Feel free to type in the chat and I will follow that, and I'll probably take a break at some point and just see if there's any help needed. But even if you don't want to follow along in person, you can totally follow along by seeing my screen. So once I have logged in, I've created quite a few of these knowledge elements, and a lot of them are interactive coding notebooks, mostly Python. So you can find these in a few ways. You can either go to notebooks on here, on this top menu bar, and see some of these notebooks, or you can search directly. So the first notebook I'll be going through today is a notebook on Jupyter widgets. So you can just search for widget in the search bar. And the notebook that we're going to be looking into is this one. It's called Intro to Jupyter Widgets. So if you search for it, it comes up. If you click on this little information page or little tile here, it'll take you to the information page about this notebook. And the cool thing is you can kind of preview what it'll look like on the iGuide. A tip, it doesn't show all the cool interactive aspects that we'll actually look through. But if you've already logged in, you can click this Run This Notebook button down here, and it will load the notebook and all of the things needed to run it and open it up in this Jupyter backend. So in this case, I'm going to assume that you have a little bit of familiarity with the like a Jupyter environment, but the main thing is you'll have one main screen here, and that's what we call the content of the notebook. Over here, you'll have a file system, and that just shows, in this case, I have a README file and the notebook file. And the main thing that you need to know to follow along is basically how to run a cell. So these notebooks have cell sections, and that are these gray boxes here. If you click on them, you can tell that you've clicked on it by it'll have this blue bar here and highlighted in blue. And then you can hit this square run button. Either click it in this menu here, or go File, Run Selected Cell, or I usually use a keyboard shortcut to run it. So that is the first basic thing. I'll pause for a second. Is there anybody who wants to follow along in using a Jupyter Notebook with this platform who needs help setting up? Feel free to either say something or say it in the chat, and I can help you troubleshoot that if needed. We'll wait for a second. Okay, not hearing anybody complain, so I'll just go forward then. So this particular notebook is an introduction to what we call IPython widgets. And the cool thing about IPython widgets is they're already easily kind of integrated in the system, and you don't have to import too much to use this in a Python Jupyter notebook. So first of all, to do any code in Jupyter Notebook, you'll need to import libraries. So to make any of the code in the rest of the notebook work, you'll want to first run this cell. And like I said, you can click it and hit this run button here, or you can run it on this file. And the only import you need for Python to use these widgets is here. Import IPy-widgets, and just for convenience, I'll call them as widgets. I've also imported matplotlib, just so that we can plot some maps near the end. But that is only for plotting, that is not for the widgets. So first of all, what is a widget? If you are using a computational notebook like these, one of the main uses is to kind of rerun Python code, show what you've done, and provide output. However, my work in particular involves various simulations. And so oftentimes we want to not just show sort of one output, we want to show the output with maybe a set of input parameters, or basically some sort of an output that changes based on some sort of a user input. And so in a nutshell, a widget is kind of an interactive object that can be used to get information from somebody who's running your cell to be able to provide in some input without completely changing and rerunning all the cell codes. And for me, the main thing that I use widgets for is like interactive displays. And these can be within a notebook here, or you can kind of use them to basically put together even like a bit of a dashboard. So, and the coolest thing also about widgets is, as we see as we go, you can basically have some sanity checks within the widget itself to be able to make sure that the input that you get from the user makes sense for your code. So basically, let's start with just showing some example widgets. So I'm running the cell. One of the basic example widgets is a slider. So this is just a little bar, and this is the default, no options. As I move this button back and forth, you can see that this value changes. And this value is displayed within the context of the notebook, but we can also get it within the code. So this W here is my variable for the widget, and it is a widget, which the class of widget is the, this is an integer slider, so int slider. And so basically the key aspect here is we're assigning that integer slider widget to the variable W, and then we have display W, which will be important a little bit later. So note that as a computational notebook, it also displays the last value that you create. So that's why if we just have w.value here without even the print, we can just see the output. And so the cool thing is I can change it here. So now it's 35, but this is still the older value. But if I rerun this cell, it'll update. So at the very simplest case, you could have some sort of a slider and then just tell your user to, set the value here. Once they set the value here, run the next cell, and it'll input that value. We can do some more interesting things, but that is like one of the most easy way to get some input and then do something with it programmatically. So some other types of sliders, we have the basic integer slider, and then this is kind of a drop down. So one of the most powerful things about widgets is you can link them together. So this is a JS link. And so basically we have created two widgets. We call them with the variable name S and T. We display both of them. This is just kind of default display setting. And then I've created a link object and basically said, link the value of our first widget to our second widget. And so when I change the value with this box by putting the arrows up and down, it changes the slider. And if I change the slider, it changes the box and is having like a sad bit. So let me restart this real quick. So remember, if I restart it, I need to input the things again. So, but yes, so this will be important. I'm hoping you can already start thinking about cool things that you can do. If I change a value on one widget, I can both easily change the value of another widget, but also remember I have this programmatic value that I can feed it back into some code. So we have value, just in case you want to keep looking at it. Here are some of these other values that you can use for a widget, but that's again for more advanced use. So what are some other widgets that we do? So a big one is a text widget. So I have a text bar with some text and a slider. So one thing you'll notice for these two widgets is they are grayed out, and I actually can't do anything with them. That's because there is this disabled value here. And when I've created these two widgets, I've said disabled equals true. So again, when I said widgets are all about getting input and basically cleaning them up before you pass it into your code, being able to disable something that is not needed, unless maybe some other value is a certain thing, or disable something after input so you can't change it. This is a very useful option. And then a key thing is, so my widget is disabled as 29, but if I change it to 30, note that when I run this cell, when I print out the new value, it's 30, and it also changed. So that's the thing. So even if you disable the entry, that is disabling extra stuff from the user, but you can still programmatically get to it. So now also watch this slider here. I can also close a widget. So when I ran this cell, we still got the value, but now it's no longer displayed in this other cell. So that's the thing about widgets is as long as you use their handle, the variable, you can interact with a widget that exists in a different cell later on in this coding notebook. So some other important widget types, you can have buttons. Right now I can click this button, nothing happens, but I'll show you how to be able to do something with this button later. We have sliders, and note that we can have integer sliders or float sliders, and you can change these values around. Again, when you're creating these widgets, a cool thing to do is you can set the minimum and the maximum value, the default value, and you can set steps. So basically, this one starts at 0, goes up to 9, and increments by 3. So if you do that for this one, you notice it goes 0, 3, 6, 9. Again, very useful for making sure that the input that you get from the slider or the widget is what you want. Another useful aspect with a slider is you can say, I want a certain range. You can give it a minimum and a maximum value and set the current default values. So if you need a range that's within a certain set of values, you can use that. And there's also a default widget for a project bar, which is really useful if you're doing some longer calculations. There's also these number box selections. So if you notice the first one, even though I keep clicking this, it is only going between 9 and 7, whereas the second one just keeps going. So again, you can have something that has inherent bounds that you can set, or just a default one. And some other kinds, there's like a toggle button, checkbox, valid. So these are all useful when you're starting to put them together. Another basic value check is you can have a set of options. And these just show for each of these different types of widgets, we have set a certain options that it can be. So for example, here we can set a certain number value, pick one, set a text value, have a ratio of certain things, click these buttons here. And then it is also can be useful for single or multiple selection. So I'm hitting shift click here on the first one, but it will only let me select one at a time. And that's because this is the general select widget. However, in the second one, I'm hitting shift click and I can select up to all of them. That is because this widget is a select multiple widget. There's also text boxes. This one has basically just a line of text, but the second one, you can type paragraphs. And the other two base widgets, which are very useful, is there's a date picker. So this will only allow you to select valid dates. And then the second one is a color picker. So since I'm on a Mac, it picks up my Mac color picker, and basically whatever settings I have in there, it'll display, and then you can get the hex value back from there. And then finally, we have all these widgets. What is the base way to interact? There is this aspect called a widget event. So notice I had a button earlier and I clicked it and nothing happened. So here I have a slider. I click to submit and it says you click slider and it says the value of click. And when I change it and do it again, I get an updated. That is because I have two of these widgets. I have descriptions, but the main aspect here for the interaction is I've created a function. The main thing is it needs to take in at least one argument, and that is the type of event. So I'm saying do a button, and this is the output widget. So basically a display widget. And then basically this just displays this value when the button's clicked. And then you also have to do one more line where this is my button widget. And then you have the button widget. and you have this on-click event. Basically, when this button's clicked, you say, do this function, and that does this run on button clicked function, and then you can display all things. So that is the first notebook. This is basically just showing you what widgets are out there. And in my second notebook, I'm going to show you how you can kind of put some of these together to create interesting interactive maps. But before I get there, does anyone have any questions?
Maybe about the width, where you say width S out widget. Does that mean that the printing goes to the output widget instead of some
Yes.
hidden console? Oh, neat.
Excellent. So in this case, thanks for that question. The nice thing about an output widget, sorry, I glossed over that a little bit, is you can use the output widget as like a widget. So basically, if I create a new function and take out that with widget, tab over, and click to submit, it's not really doing anything because the output for this code cell is the display of the widget, which is this last line. And so it's actually, it would be printing to the output, but the output is hidden just because it's kind of overwritten with this particular thing. So because I have this widget in the function, that means that it'll display once I've done it, and it'll just kind of keep going. But the cool thing is there's also this clear. So this is my output widget here. If I do output widget dot clear, oops, I think I have to do, hang on. Oh no, I think I have to do clear widget. Sorry. It's been a little bit since I've last worked on this. And then kind of, I can also programmatically clear this widget. So this is not the best example, but I will actually show another example in my second notebook where I can refresh, add stuff to the output, but also clear it so it doesn't just kind of keep going. Yeah, display options are very nice. It gives you more control over where you actually display. So any other questions? Okay, if not, so that's the basic set of widgets that you can use and incorporate into your notebook and the ones that I find the most useful. So in the second case, I'll show you how to use Bokeh, which is a very nice package. It's Python library, but it basically uses JavaScript visualizations because there's a lot more cool things that you can do with JavaScript. Oh, I see some chat. Okay. No new questions. So in this case, if you want to follow along, go back to platform.iguide.io, and if you search Bokeh, B-O-K-E-H, then the notebook that I'm going to use here is this interactive mapping using Python and Bokeh. So we'll pop up this the page right here, and then you can hit run this notebook again. And this will pull the notebook that I've created into your own private copy. So one thing to note here, with my widget intro thing, all of this, I didn't use any external data. I didn't use anything else. Everything lives within this notebook. And if you look at my file browser here, I just have a README to be nice to the GitHub repo that this is in. So it just has a little bit of information. However, for the interactive Bokeh demo, I have an image here, I have a CSV file, also README, and then I have some basic spatial data. I have a shape file for Chicago parks, and a shapefile for Chicago zip codes. So hang on, I see I have something else. I do not actually have a PowerPoint for this presentation. Basically, so if you've come in a little later, everything that I'm talking about in this presentation are in these 2 notebooks that you can see and you can actually preview on the iGuide platform. Actually, I'll put links to these. So note that this is a preview, an HTML preview on the platform page. So if I scroll down here, you can get just a little preview of these are the actual interactive maps that I'll show you how to make in the second one. And you can actually do some cool things with that and the second map. So let me actually, the first notebook can be found here. So this is the first notebook. Sorry, I was like, I can actually just give you flat URLs. Oops. My apologies. That is the second notebook, and this is the first notebook. Okay, and then the keyword for this one is, the second one is bokeh, B-O-K-E-H. Excellent. Okay, so is everybody set to explore this second one who would like to follow along? You got it. Okay. Excellent. Okay, so let's go with this one. So the challenge about the IPython widget notebook, oh, by the way, this is the basic widget page. I will actually also put that in the chat. If you're interested in learning more about basically widgets, what do they look like, with a little bit more depth. The one thing that I really wanted to do with widgets was basically display 2 maps side by side, and like if I change something on one map, kind of display it on the other, or kind of put connections in. And I will say I took several weeks at some point to do some very more interesting functions to try and connect these with the widgets to be able to have this like output. But it was a bit fragile and challenging. So that's when I looked for other ways to do it, and I found this bokeh library. So bokeh is generally more of like a visualization library with JavaScript, but there are some convenience functions that basically hide a lot of the complexity needed to link these widgets and put them together in a more powerful way than what you can do with basic widgets. So if the kind of code that you're doing, you only need some simple input, maybe you have like a map and you want to say, all right, let's do map A, map B, map C. You can do one of these drop-down boxes here and say, oh, I want the hen map, the dog map, or the cat map. And if that's all of the interactivity you need, great. But if you want to start doing some more powerful stuff, especially if you know a little bit of JavaScript, which unfortunately is just really used a lot for more interactive visualization, so you have to get out of Python a little bit, but something like the bokeh library makes this a lot easier. So the main thing here is make sure that your kernel over here is set to Python 3-0.8.0, because there are some library dependencies that only kind of work with this particular kernel. So in this case, if it's not showing this, you can click over here, go down until you select this, and hit select. It should be automatically, but just in case it's not. And then the other thing is, for this particular one, we need some specific versions of bokeh, pandas, geopandas, and numpy to get some of the features working. So run this first. This is the pip install, and it'll install the correct versions of the packages that we need. I've already installed it in my kernel, so it won't take very long, but if you're doing it fresh, it will. Excellent. It will likely take a little bit longer. So mine is good. So make sure that these are all good. And then the most important one for this one is if you run this cell, make sure that the Bokeh version is 2.3.0. So within this notebook, I have two main just demonstration shapefiles I'm using. The first one is the Chicago zip codes. And so these are basically polygon data for zip codes in Chicago. And the second one is a set of Chicago parks, and these are point data. So just wanted to use them to show some of these interactivities that you can put with spatial data. And this section has some more information about where I got that data from, the Chicago Open Data. So this is the second most important cell that you need to go to run to make everything else work. We're using NumPy to basically do some data cleaning, date time, because we have this cool date slider, pandas and geopandas, because it's really nice and useful to read in geospatial data into what's called a geodata frame, which is just an easy to use format. And then all of these are functions specifically to the Bokeh library that I'm importing to basically have a shortcut for space. So basically we're getting figures, we're getting this aspect of like output notebook. So this adds some interactivity within the Jupyter notebook. Aspects like some color, color mapper, color bars, some interactivity tools like the hover tool, some sliders, ruler color library, etc. And then for this one, for our interactivity to last within the notebook, we want to run this line here, the output notebook. I think we might be able to share the recording. Sure. I think it should be available in a little bit afterwards, but also feel free to send me an email. Actually, I'll put my email in the chat if you don't find a link to the recording.
Yeah, the recordings should be available online on
Okay.
the iGuide website, maybe in
Excellent.
a day or two.
Oh, good. Thank you so much, Anand. I will say my email will change in probably a couple months, so that will also be a thing. Okay. Excellent. So first of all, I'm going to go through this a little faster because if you're interested, you can kind of look through this notebook in a bit more depth. But this first section, I'm loading the shapefiles for the parks and the zip codes. And basically, I've loaded them as a GeoPandas geodata frame. And so now we can look a little bit about what that data looks like within here. So the zip codes, we have an ID, we have the actual zip, but the main thing is this geometry column that has polygon data for the polygons. And then this is what the parks data set looks like. So basically it has a faculty type, whether it's indoor or outdoor, which park it is within, the X and Y coordinates, and the main thing is like this is this point data. So if we do a simple plotting, this is what the Chicago zip codes look like throughout the city of Chicago. And here are what the parks look like. So basically just what's some interesting data to look at. So one aspect, we're going to be using some tiles. So we want to, originally the coordinate reference system is set to 4326. So basically we just want to change it to the web Mercator because this is more of like a web mapping. So these sections change that. And then the next section, I'm going to do a bit of adjustment to the data to just get some interesting information to be able to map the first maps. So first, we're using the NumPy library to just create a set of color values based on whether the park is indoor or outdoor. So this creates an array that says just blue, red, and we're going to use that later to color the map. And then we'll have a base point of, so this shows you how to set a new column in the geodata frame called point color. So basically this calls any outdoor park, it sets the color value to red, otherwise it's blue. And if we look at the new data frame, we can see I have a new column called point color, which just says blue or red. And then the second thing, we can use a spatial join to see how many of the parks are in each zip code. And then this next set basically groups all the parts by zip code, creates a little mini data frame that does that, and then adds it to the new one. So we've basically said how many parks are in each of our zip code, and we're adding a new count to the zip code data frame of just how many parks are in there, which we're going to use for map. So for Bokeh, the kind of a powerful tool it has is you can set the source, and in this case we're using a GeoJSON data source, and so we're saying here's our geodata frame, we're going to save it as a JSON and call that the source for Bokeh. And Bokeh is powerful enough to be able to use that pretty well. Here's some basic aspects to just set some background color information for a map, get some tiles, set some color bar information. And this bit is where we set the figures for the first and second map, which I'll show you in a second and then explain a little bit more about what these are. Hang on, I see another chat. Okay. So this first section here, we're setting up the first map. And so we're calling it, this is a Bokeh figure. We're calling the variable name S1 for submap 1. I'm very inventive. Setting the coordinate X and Y range and the plot width. And then similarly, this is how we're doing that for that second map. The main thing here is for the first map, we're going to add patches, which is the Bokeh idea for like polygons, and circles, which is like a point. So my patches, the data source is the zip code source that I've created right here and told Bokeh that this is where you get the data. And this is using the X and Y coordinates for here, and then has a legend label, line color, and an opacity. And then this bit is saying, okay, now plot the X and Y points for the parks, and we'll say a little bit about how we want those to look at. So this is also something that Bokeh does fairly well. You can create a tooltip, and it'll automatically know to add this to the map. We can say the tooltip says park time, and then we have this @ sign and then facility _ n. So if we look back up to our polygon point for the parks, we have this facility n, it will draw from that column and use that for naming. And then you have to do this this creates that hover tool, and this adds the hover tool to our variable for that first map figure. And then we can add like the legends and some other stuff. So for the second one, so this is how we have this first figure. So we have the we can zoom in a little bit. Sorry, my mouse is not cooperating, but we have the outlines for the zip codes, and then we have these points for the parks here. And notice that my parks are blue. The blue and red is from that point color column that I created before. And then for the second map, again, I'm going a little fast because I want to show you that last map because it's really cool. But this is where we have the figure, we have the title. This is important. This is a really awesome thing from Bokeh. I'm setting the X and Y coordinates to be the same as this first map that I already created. And so instead of, there was a lot of code that I had when I was just using widgets to do this, this creates it in one subline. This is where I can have these tooltips that says the zip code and the count. So remember, that's like the part count. And in the second one, I have these tiles. So that's why we see the fancy map in here. So we can kind of zoom around. And so the nice thing is when I zoom on one, it zooms on the other. And it sounds simple, but that's really nice. I have the zip codes colored. And then if you hover over, you can see the count and you can see the type of park in the first one. And so this is the fill color where I have it set in this line here. And then this is, I have the layout, basically says do these horizontally, and then this display, it'll show. So that is our first set of maps. Let me show you the second set, and then I'll just take general questions because I know we're heading out of time. So for the second set of maps, what I'm doing is I have a set of movies that are displayed in the parks in the summer of 2018. So basically it just has a day, date, what type of park this is, the title of the movie, the park address, and the park location. But notice that this location value isn't formatted quite how we would like. So first, these sets of ones, I'm showing you how I basically incrementally go to try and get the location, to split it up, to grab the latitude, longitude, to split those coordinates, select the first and second, and trim them. So these are the steps that I'm going to, and then basically in these two cells, I do all those steps together, combine them, and add them back to the movie data frame. So those sets of cells basically transform this location value to a separate latitude and longitude coordinates. And then here, we're just removing all of the ones that it didn't have valid latitude and longitude coordinates for these movies. This section is where we're using the date time value to add a timestamp column, which is formatted so that I can use a nice time slider. And we have a default rating column that we're going to use some JavaScript to make it more interesting. And then now we're going to convert this from a CSV file to another geodata frame. And we're saying we want to use these latitude and longitude values for the geometry. So now we have point geometry that's created from the latitude and longitude values. And then we also want to give it a coordinate reference system because we've created this from scratch. And we want to just make sure it's the same as those other two. Now, this section, I've created a tiny little mini data set, and this is showing you how I've created it from just a Python array. So I said, oh, here are the 3 movies that I've seen with a little bit of information about it. We're going to create that into a pandas data frame. And then we're creating another timestamp value for this little data frame that is in the same format as where we made this timestamp here, where the timestamp is basically like number of seconds since like a certain epoch. So basically just like an easy way to reference it without worrying about some of the complexities of dates in the date format. So if we see here, we have this timestamp here that matches this timestamp column up here and have a nice human readable date and some stuff like the titles and the notes. And so this last bit is, this is how we're going to do the next map. So this is, we make these sources for Boca. We get a background title provider. This creates the main map image. So we have the X range. We want to have the tooltip where we get the title. And then this is the circle. So that's the point locations for these movies again. Now this is some fancy, it's not too fancy, but this is basically a JavaScript bit, which will change it red or yellow depending on the movie rating. And then this last one basically has some complicated bits where it will filter by the date timestamp for the slider and then connect it to the other one. And if you want to look into more of this, you can kind of look into it on your own time. But it shows you basically a template for how to do that. And last, this is like a tap tool. So when I click or hover over bits, it will be able to do some fancy stuff using the columns from that source geospatial data. And then this one is where we create the timeline figure. And then again, importantly, we need to link the widgets together using, in this case, it's a JS link command, which says have the same range from here to this date range slider, and we have this kind of select. So using all that, we can make this map. And so this is, again, just a demo map to show how you can connect these widgets. So the first thing you can do is change the point color from default, which is blue, to by the movie rating. You can change the slider, and hang on, let me zoom out a little bit. When I change the slider, it will hide or show the different movies if they are on the date range. And I had a little bit of nicety to transform that into this date here. And then also we have this other timeline of that shows the movies that I saw and has this kind of tooltip that pops up in there. And then lastly, if you click on a movie, if you hover over it, you can see the title of the movie. And if you click on it, you can see more information, and the movie is highlighted here. So for example, if some of the parks are showing multiple movies, and then it'll show like all of them. So basically that is it for this particular set of notebooks. Basically in this case, I wanted to show you how some widgets worked, and then in this case showing you how you can use these widgets and maps to kind of come together and create a mini interactive display that uses data that exist in the shapefiles. So we have about 10 minutes-ish left. So yeah, does anybody have any questions based on what I was showing today?
Hi, Becky. I got a question for you.
Sure.
So with the shape files and whatnot, is that I know Jupyter Notebooks don't store it, but is it stored on a Jupyter Notebook, or is it queried from another holding somewhere
So
else?
the shapefiles used here, I have stored within the directory that lives in the Jupyter Hub. So if you look at this, this is all of the folders that I have in my Jupyter Hub that exist in the kind of the Jupyter backend for the iGuide platform. So the one that I was just using is the Spoka demo. And so here, if I'm in this subfolder, the parks data set is here. So here's the shapefile with the projection information, the database, and the other metadata. And here's the zip file here. So in this case, when I created this notebook and saved it publicly on the iGuide platform, I uploaded these data to my GitHub repository that it draws from to populate into here. So basically that's to make sure that the stuff, if you're using this, it stays the same, but you could also link to like a hosted data set elsewhere, but it's a little bit more complex. But these are not stored in the notebook itself. I mean, you're creating an object that lives in the notebook while the notebook is running, but the data that it's using for this map is locally stored in this directory in your file system that is for you. That I've added to my GitHub repo. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm wondering how to incorporate the files that I have, like in my ArcGIS shape files and the geodatabase that I've created in there, or the GDB files I have, and use Jupyter to query them.
So basically, you can upload files. So because shape files have a lot of subfiles that you need all of the different files for the shape file to work. If I'm uploading a shape file, I usually create a directory or a folder first. And you can do this by, there's this button here that says new folder. So I can like do my shapefile. It's always a good habit to not have spaces in your directories or file names, just because sometimes that leads to weird behavior. And if you double click that, you can upload files here, and that'll take you to the regular one. And say you had like 6 sub files, which makes your shape file, you can select them and hit open, and that will upload your shape files to your local Jupyter Hub instance. And then you can basically when I imported the files initially, here you go. So the file path I have, it says Chicago Parks / Chicago Parks.shapefile. So that says my notebook is in the top directory. So look into this folder and open the shapefile. And it's smart enough to know that if I've given it the shapefile, that it expects the other files exist too.
Got it. Thank you.
Awesome. Any additional questions? Well, if not, feel free to send me an email if you're interested and you have some like troubleshooting. I've done a lot of kind of just small scale interactivity within a Jupyter Notebook to try and, make things a little bit nicer to display, share it with other folks who might be a little less comfortable changing the code bits themselves, and could be like a nice start for stuff like a dashboard. And if you come to me later, maybe look my name, because I'll have a new email that I don't know exactly what it is yet. But yeah, again, feel free to reach out. Or also, I have almost all of my notebooks and stuff are on the iGuide platform as well as CyberGS X. So feel free to take a look at those elements as well. And yeah, thanks so much. Thank you, Stuart. Thanks, Michael. Thank you. All right, and thanks, Anand, too, for helping
Thank
set this
you.
up.
Yeah. So you can stop the recording.
Let me see how I do that. Oh, here you go.